we've talked about this before, the more strategically minded parts of like the arms control community, they've been agitating for a while to get rid of ICBMs. Like, they're not needed. It's this push button nuclear holocaust weapon. You know, once you launch, there's no ability to stop it. They're super expensive to maintain, right? So if we get rid of them, we can kind of improve strategic stability and cut costs. So it's like, well, a very hawky retired admiral wrote a piece in the New York Post, which is like, you know, to the right of the New York Times by quite a bit. And he made this was like 2 days ago, he made this very elaborate case to get rid of air-launched nuclear deterrent capabilities. And the reason he was doing it was the Vipkaktham thing I wrote about. Like, his goal is to save ICBMs and to avoid anyone looking closely at nuclear submarines, because he's a retired admiral. And so to do that, he lays out the argument for defunding LRSO, the long-range standoff weapon. So this is the nuclear capable warhead that the B-52 and the B-21 can deliver. So that's the air nuclear deterrent piece, right? A bunch of national security bros, they started clapping back at him at this op-ed saying, like, actually, we need to fund one less Columbia-class submarine, right? That would save hundreds of millions of dollars. We need to get rid of the sea-launched nuclear cruise missile, which the Navy says it doesn't even fucking want, right? And so if you add up do you realize what's happening here? If you add up all these arguments that they're making, they're exposing the false god of nuclear deterrence. Like, they're each making the case for why other parts of the nuclear triad are bullshit. And so it's like,
I mean, we talked about this recently as well, where, like, I mean, the establishment of the triad itself is a product of inter-service rivalry. And it goes back actually to the establishment of DoD and the unification of the armed services after World War II. If I recall correctly, it was Secretary Forrestal of the Navy who, during the sort of debates over whether and how to unify the armed services, raised sort of the question of, civilian control of the military and also the militarization of foreign policy. If you had the establishment of the Air Force and all these other things also in the National Security Act of 1947, CIA, National Security Council, all of these sort of new entities within the sort of military establishment. The point of this is that, like, one of the critical arguments against unification of the armed services was the ability of special interests to corrupt defense policy and foreign policy writ large, and also sort of the how that manifests in inter-service rivalry, which, like, I think really shines through today when you have debates like this, and also just like the sort of obsession with technological superiority and nuclear superiority specifically. My colleagues at the Simpson Center actually published a paper earlier this week, called Gambling on Armageddon, that I'd really recommend folks read if you're interested in sort of like the history of the establishment of the triad, sort of like deterrence theory, where it's brought us today. And this idea of sort of technological superiority and our sort of preoccupation with that has led us down many faulty, dangerous, expensive paths. The B-21 is one of them, in addition to the ICBM. It goes back to, like, Roosevelt being really afraid of, like, air power and air power in Nazi Germany. And, like, it's just the history of air power and sort of how that's manifested, and the idea of, like, sort of strategic bombing now is wild. I think that's a much harder argument to make, to get rid of the, like, B-21 than the ICBM, but I'm for it personally.
Yeah, keep sending in your arguments, folks, about why we need to cut different weapon systems. No, but, like, the nuclear triad was not, like you say, and this is the history. I guess it's in this report, but it was also in there's a classic book called Wizards of Armageddon by Fred Kaplan, and he covers this too. But it's like, the nuclear triad was not this wholly strategic concept. Like, we backed our way into it from, like, the reality of bureaucratic politics, basically. And then we fetishized it. Then people who make their living staring at, penis-shaped weapons started developing, like, these sacrosanct ideas around it and everything. But, like, it just ain't so, like, it's very happenstance that we even, like, came to these ideas in the first place,